of our sermon series called Finding Joy. And remember, what we're doing in this series is delving into and wrestling with the 8 pillars to learn how it is that you and I can find and live into lives that are filled to overflowing with joy. Because if we're honest with ourselves, I think we could all use a bit more joy. Now, last week, to begin our process of finding joy, we started with pillar number 1, which is perspective. And what we discovered is that even though we do not have the ability to control everything that happens to us, whether good or bad, we do have the power to choose how we respond. Or we do have the ability to choose our perspective in any given situation, which means instead of focusing in on all the negative, which is usually our default position, we learn through the use of the opportunity, the long, the other, and the God perspectives, how to see and make sense of the world in a way that brings just a bit more joy. So to continue to build upon all of that, today we are going to be getting into pillar number 2, which is humility. And the best way I know how to help you understand what it means to live true humility is to walk you through the strange yet powerful story of the Tower of Babel. And I know you guys, it's probably been a long time since you've heard this story, but I think everybody has heard this story in Sunday school. So, the context of this story in the book of Genesis is that after God went about creating human beings so he could live in relationship with them and put them in the Garden of Eden, humans in their free will chose to rebel against God by eating of the forbidden fruit. The result being a broken relationship with God and humans being expelled from the garden. Then once human beings are kicked out of the garden, or out of God's presence, which is what's most important, Genesis tells us that things go from bad to worse very, very quickly. Because instead of listening to and being guided by the ways of God, which is what's best for everyone, they continue to choose their own ways, beginning with Cain's murder of Abel. And then from that horrible starting place, we get the development of corrupt civilizations that finally lead God to doing this, or finally lead God to hitting the reset button. Genesis 6:5-8 says this: "The Lord saw that the wickedness of humankind was great in the earth, and that every inclination of their thoughts and hearts was only evil continually. And that the Lord was sorry that he had made humankind on the earth, and it grieved him to his heart. So the Lord said, I will blot out from the earth the human beings I have created, people together with the animals and creeping things and the birds of the air, for I am sorry I have made them." But the good news in all of this is that Noah found favor in the sight of the Lord. Or because things have gone to hell in a handbasket pretty quickly after the creation of the world, God decides to hit this reset button by sending a great flood to wipe everything out and all to start all over again, which he is going to do by using the one person in whom he has found favor. And so it's after the great flood, and as human beings are repopulating the earth, that we find this incredible story about the Tower of Babel taking place. So it begins in Genesis 11:1-2 by saying this: "Now the whole earth had one language and the same words. And as they migrated from the east, they came upon a plain in the land of Shinar and settled there." Or here, what we find going on early after the great flood is that human beings decided for whatever reason to move to the land of Shinar, which is probably in the area of present-day Iraq, somewhere between the Tigris and Euphrates River. And of course, at this point, so soon after the flood, according to Genesis, it makes sense that everyone spoke the same language. But then as Genesis goes on to explain it, it's like as soon as these people get to Shinar, these humans all of a sudden are up to no good again. So Genesis continues. It says, "And they said to one another, 'Come, let us make bricks and burn them thoroughly.' And they had brick for stone and bitumen for mortar. And they said, 'Come, let us build ourselves a city with the tower to the top in the heavens, and let us make a name for ourselves, otherwise we shall be scattered abroad upon the face of the whole earth.'" Now, oftentimes the way that this story gets interpreted is that the sin that is being committed here is that human beings, in their lust to become like the gods themselves, or to become like God, pooled all of their resources and all of their ingenuity together to create this great city. And in that great city, a great tower that would get them up to the heavens so that they could become like God, or so that they could become gods themselves. Which, of course, is not a good thing, and why God responds like this. The Lord came down to see the city and the tower which mortals had built. And the Lord said, look, they are one people, and they all have one language. And this is only the beginning of what they will do. Nothing that they propose to do will now be impossible for them. Come, let us go down and confuse their language there, so that they will not understand one another's speech. So the Lord scattered them abroad from there over the face of all the earth, and they left off building the city. Or according to this interpretation, because human beings were working together, that gave them the ability to build this tower that would get them into the heavens so that they could become like gods. And so what God did in response to that is he came down to confuse their language. Or God, to keep things from spinning out of control a second time. Remember the flood here, right? That's the first time. God steps in and disrupts these plans by causing these people to speak in other languages so they couldn't come together and accomplish this feat. Well, now that we have walked through this common interpretation, what I want to share with you next is the one important piece that we oftentimes miss when reading this story because we're not from the ancient world. That then brings everything together in a bit different way. So, according to some scholars, the tower that these humans are building in the midst of the city is probably a reference to a ziggurat. And what you need to know about a ziggurat is that these were common structures found in ancient Mesopotamia, similar to pyramids, yet with stairs that led to a flat place on the top, or something that probably looks similar to this. But, contrary to popular belief, the purpose of these towers was not to help humans get into heaven to become like the gods. No, ziggurats in the ancient world were usually a part of a temple complex, with the ziggurat being placed next to a temple, with the temple being understood as God's house, or the place that God lived when he or she was on the earth. So the function of these ziggurats was to make a way for God to come down from the heavens, using the steps of this tower to get into his temple, ultimately making a way for people to live in relationship with their God. So again, these towers were not about getting people into heaven. In fact, for the most part, people weren't allowed on the ziggurats. It was holy ground. But to make a way for the God to come down from the heavens to the earth. And also that humans could live in relationship with them through the temple. So what all of that means when you put this story back into the overall story of Genesis is that what these people were attempting to do through the creation of this tower was, again, it's not about getting into heaven, but instead was about making a way for God to come down from heaven so they could live in relationship with God once again, which remember is what they lost in the fall, which, by the way, is also a good thing and something that God also wants. So that means that the problem that is happening here is not that these people have built a tower for God to come down and live among them. No, the problem is why they want to live in the presence of God, or why they want God to come and live among them, which is made clear in Genesis 11:4. Then they said, "Come, let us build ourselves a tower with its top in the heavens, and let us make a name for ourselves." Did you hear that? Let us make a name for ourselves. Let us make a name for ourselves. So the sin that is being committed here, causing God to come down and confuse the language of these people before they mess things up again, is that the only reason they want God to come down, or the only reason they want to be in God's presence, is so that they can use God to make a name for themselves. Or in other words, so they could use God for their own benefit. Which, of course, is not how it's supposed to work. No, the way it's supposed to work is that humans are supposed to be helping God get what he wants, not the other way around. So again, the sin of this story is these people are trying to use God to get what they want instead of devoting themselves to helping God get what he wants. And how powerful is that, right? Okay, so now that you're getting your brain wrapped around all of that, what I hope is happening within you at this moment as this story begins to sink in and work on you is that you're beginning to realize that this story is not just something that happened to these evil people a long, long time ago. It's easy to talk about those people a long, long time ago. But instead it's something that happens to us all of the time. And that this story is also our story. Where we, even today, instead of being a people who have devoted our lives to playing our part in working towards God's plan for the world, helping God to get what He wants, are all about seeking and using God, whether we realize it or not, to get what we want or to make a name for ourselves. Or how many of you, if you get real honest with yourselves, are guilty of trying to use God to get what you want instead of devoting your life to helping God to get what He wants? Yeah, I think we're all guilty of that. Because again, this is not just their problem, this is our problem. Okay, so now that you've got a handle on all of that, let me now show you what this has to reveal to us about living humility, and in turn, how living humility helps us find joy. So for me, what the story of Babel really seems to put into perspective is what it looks like to live true humility. Because the truth is, humility is not about beating ourselves down or acting like we don't have skills or haven't accomplished some good things, which is the way I think most people think about humility these days. No, true humility is about coming to terms with the fact that your life and everything else for this matter is not about you making a name for yourself, but instead is and always has been about God making a name for Himself. Or to say it in a bit clearer way, none of this is about you getting what you want, but about God getting what He wants. Again, very important. None of this is about you getting what you want, but about God getting what He wants. But before you start getting all depressed because I've just reminded you that the world doesn't revolve around you, let me now show you how this is actually a very good thing, that once you learn to embrace and live it will help you find the joy that you've been chasing after. But to get that, what I need you to do is I need you to take a moment and think about all that pressure that you were constantly putting yourself under. And all because you're chasing after, devoting your life to making a name for yourself. Or in other words, as you're striving to get what you want. And the truth is, you know exactly what I'm talking about because it's usually the stuff that's keeping you up at night. Okay, so now that you have all of that in mind and are starting to feel the stress that all that pressure causes, because let's be honest, we really do believe on occasion that the world revolves around us, or that our lives are the most important things, or that everything depends on us, and without us it would all fall apart. Or with all of that in mind, what I want you to begin to say to yourself is the simple truth that the story of Babel reveals. This is not about me. This is not about me. This is not about me. No, this is about God. And if you're anything like me, what you experience is you begin to get that, no, really, none of this is about me. Is that all of a sudden, all that weight that you've been carrying around with you, which keeps you from experiencing all that joy because you are so consumed by getting what you want or making a name for yourself, it begins to fall away as you let go and let God. Or as you begin to let God be God and you take your place as one of His people. Well, that's why true humility is a necessary part of finding joy. Coming to the realization that it's not about us. So, now may you come to see, as you continue your quest to find a bit more joy in your life, that one of the foundational pieces that you have to embrace is to realize that all of this, even your life, is not, nor has it ever been about you making a name for yourself or you getting what you want, but has always been about God getting what He wants. Which means it's time for all of us to let go of all that stress and anxiety that we've been dragging around with us for far too long as we strive to get what we want. And to give ourselves completely and totally to helping God make a name for Himself. Because again, this is not about us. And that's a good thing. Let us pray. Father, as we come before you and week 2 of this sermon series where we're chasing after joy. Help us to understand today that contrary to maybe what we've been taught, or contrary to what we think most of the time, that this life, this world, and everything is not about us. The world really doesn't revolve around us in any kind of way, but instead is about you and what you want. It instead is about you making a great name for yourself. So today, O Lord, in light of that truth, help us to set down all those things that we have been trying to carry as we have devoted our lives to what we want, to making a name for ourselves, and to simply let you be you, and we can find our place then in you. Or help us, O Lord, today in true humility, give it all to you and simply find our place where we can serve you, knowing that you are the one who is in control. You are the one who this is about. You are the one who is our God. We ask this all in Jesus Christ's name. Amen. On the night when Jesus was betrayed, he took a loaf of bread. He blessed it, then he broke it, and he said, "Take, eat. This is my body broken for you." Then in the same manner after dinner, he took the cup. He blessed it. He says, "This is the cup of the new covenant poured out in my blood for the forgiveness of all sins." Which means every time we eat this bread, drink this cup, we do so in remembrance of our Lord. And so today, as we come to this table and in response to what we just heard, it's my hope that you will use this as a moment to come to the realization that this is not about you. It's really not about you. Now, it doesn't mean that you don't play your part. It doesn't mean that you mean nothing. It just means that in the big scheme of things, we have our part to play, and everything else is about helping God to get what he needs, which is what's best for everyone and everything. So I invite you today to this table to begin to reflect on how this really is about you. Let us pray. Father, we come before you, and again, we're grateful for this time that we get to focus in on one of the most important parts of our faith, the moment you gave your life for everything. But today, O Lord, as we come, help us not just to focus in on salvation, grace, and life that is offered there. Help this be a moment where we truly come to realize that it's not about us, but instead it's about you. It's about you getting what you want. What you want most is a relationship with every single one of us. So today, O Lord, as we come to this table, may we realize, again, this is not about us, but then encounter you, but then get to know you because we know that what you want most is a relationship. So today, we pray that we come to this table. Now will you join me in our benediction? At Great Bend First Christian Church, our vision is to bring heaven first in all that we do. Our mission to inspire ordinary people to live extraordinary lives with Christ, fostering faith, cultivating kids, and making community. And so now may you go back out into the world, living into the extraordinary lives that God has created for you, by devoting yourself to putting heaven first in all that we do. In the name and in the Spirit of Jesus, we gather in this place, not just to gather,